Hi, everyone. It's John Olczyk here. Welcome to the podcast again, the Cybersecurity Bridge. For those of you who haven't, the few of you who haven't seen my podcast yet, each episode is broken into 3 sections. We talk about the present of a cybersecurity area. We talk about the future of that area. And then the Cybersecurity Bridge is the 3rd section where we talk about how we get from the present to the future. Now, I'm really happy to have an old friend and a great guest on the show, Ed Gaudet, who is the CEO of Censinet. And we're going to talk about healthcare and cybersecurity. But before we do, Ed, are you ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
Oh, no. You're going to try to stump me this morning, John.
This one, so I try to choose questions for my guests, so you may know this one.
Okay.
So, of course, in talking about healthcare and cybersecurity, we all remember, or you certainly remember, the Change Healthcare breach of 2024.
Yes.
Okay, for those who aren't familiar, you should be, but Change Healthcare does about 15 billion transactions per day. And let's see, what else can I tell you? It was a ransomware attack by the Russian group, sometimes known as Black Cat. And aside from halting operations, it's assumed that Black Cat exfiltrated about 6 terabytes of data. So here's your question, Ed. As of October of 2024, United Healthcare Group reported the total financial impact, or estimated the total financial impact. And was that estimate nearly 1 billion, nearly 2 billion, nearly 3 billion, or nearly 4 billion?
Oh, I thought that's what you were going to ask me. I think in my head it's nearly 2 billion, it's like 1.9, but I'm probably wrong. But that's my answer. Final answer, John.
Okay, you're wrong. But you join a distinguished group of guests I've had who've been wrong about that.
Now I'm sure it's more nearly 4 billion, right?
No, it's actually, it was nearly 3. It was,
okay.
As of October, they reported 2.87 billion.
2.8. Well, I was close with the 0.8, though. I got the 0.8 right.
0.8 right. Absolutely. And we can talk about Change Healthcare as we go through our discussion. But
yeah,
Ed, there's a lot going on in healthcare, and we'll talk about lots of different aspects. But for starters, just give me your general overview. What's the risk landscape? What's the cybersecurity threat landscape in healthcare today?
Yeah, John, I love that. I love that question, especially as it relates to how you think about the past, the present, and that bridge to the future. And the industry is really in this transformative period between cyber risks and obviously the operations and the business and all the threats that are out there in healthcare. And, we just had this this new attack vector thrown at us a couple of years ago called AI. I'm sure you've heard of it. So exponentially, we went from, having a pretty good handle on things and making progress to all of a sudden throwing all plans up in the air. I was at Mike Tyson said everyone's got a plan until they go in the ring and get punched in the face. Well, we've all been punched in the face with AI. I mean, the good news is there's an incredible future with the application of AI in healthcare. The challenges are that in a hospital setting where patient risk is patient safety, we just can't adopt these new technologies without really thinking through the impact they could have on patient safety and on patient care. So in healthcare, unlike other industries that are probably, diving in, right? We have to take a much more governance-based approach to the adoption of AI. So one of the things that I think as an industry we're all kind of learning is how do we build out those AI governance programs? How do we build out and balance the ability to bring in new technology without bringing in new risks to the overall health system?
Yeah, those are all great points. And just a couple of kind of high-level things about healthcare that I've learned is one is the margins in healthcare are pretty slim.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you've got a lot of legacy systems and then rapid adoption of new technologies, and not just AI, but like the Internet of Medical Things, wearables, telehealth. So there's a lot going on there. And then, as you pointed out, the threat landscape, there's a statistic I saw this morning that the frequency of ransomware in 2024 doubled in healthcare and affected 1,000 U.S. hospitals. So I always say it's a perfect storm of sort of legacy technology, new technology coming together. What does that do for risk, and what are you seeing in your customer base? Are they scrambling, or they have this under control?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. Let's start with the margin. We always say, no margin, no mission. And especially as you look at the next couple of years, incredible pressure right now on margin for health systems based on what's happening administratively. And they're taking away a lot of funding that could be used to for investments in IT, investments in cybersecurity, et cetera. So there's an incredible amount of pressure right now. We just heard of a health system today that just let go of a lot of people because they have to deal with the lack of funding coming from Medicare, Medicaid. And so that's going to be a focus over the next 4 years for folks, and how to, again, invest in those areas that keep us safe, keep our patients safe. And so in particular, if you look at, we run a benchmark study every year, we look at the amount that health systems are spending on cybersecurity as it relates to IT. And on average, it's sort of in the 4% range. And if you look at other industries, it's going to be more in the 8 to 9% range, right? So already the industry is at a deficit for keeping up with all of the threats, all the attacks that are out there or coming over the next couple of years. I think we're in this lull. I was talking to a few customers the other day. It feels like we're in this lull where the organized bad guys are all building something big now that they have AI. And I don't think we've really seen the impact that's coming our way. So I feel like over the next year or so, we have an opportunity to get our organizations in line, our processes in line, and the technologies we've invested in over the last, couple of years, really at a state of productivity and providing us the protection that, again, we've been investing in. So as you think about, are they scrambling? The less mature organizations are scrambling or doing nothing, right? They're focusing on operations or care delivery, which, again, they should be focusing on as well, right? But they're probably, and there's a lot in this category that are still using outdated processes, outdated tools and technologies to manage cybersecurity, manage risk as well. So, the good news is there's a lot of opportunities like what we do at Censinet to enable them to do a lot more with a lot less. And it's not that, we're saying you put in the technology and you can replace 100 people, right? It's about balancing or rebalancing where those people are focused, right? So you may have a lot of people or no people doing risk management, risk assessments, right, for third parties. You may only be able to get a sliver of your inventory because you don't have the automation, you don't have the right processes or people in place. Technologies are out there and solutions are out there that enable you to get much more throughput and much more velocity now than you could, 5 years ago. So there should be no excuses. They're I believe they're affordable given where you could be spending your money, but it also gives the CISO and the CIO the ability to kind of step back and say, okay, as we bridge the future, right, as we start to realign and transform our organizations for the next 10 years, do we have the right people in the right roles? And should we be leveraging and applying more technology? Certainly with AI, right? I predict, and I was thinking about this morning, John, so it's kind of timely. There are a lot of folks in healthcare and in other industries that are doing assessment work, right? And I think, and I'm going to make a bold statement here, so I'm sure a lot of my customers are going to be unhappy about this, but the role of the assessor, the way it is today, is going away. And I think there's an opportunity for those people that are doing assessment work to look at other areas in cyber where they can apply their knowledge of assessments, of that whole process, and leverage technology that's available today to do the rote work that they were doing, right? So it's not necessarily replacing people per se, because a lot of organizations are looking for good people. It's about rethinking the application of people, process, and technology, that holy trinity we all talk about, but then everyone kind of forgets about it when they're actually putting pen to paper, right? And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about what is the organization of a risk team or an IT or an IT security team going to look like in 5 years. I think it's going to be fundamentally different, John.
I apologize for interrupting, but that brings us to our next chapter of our discussion, and that's the future. And of course, you brought up AI, so I'll bring it up too. AI on the diagnostic side, AI on the patient care side, but also AI on the administrative side. And you pointed out that healthcare is understaffed and cybersecurity is understaffed. So what are you seeing there in terms of, let's talk about AI for administrative gains. Are you seeing things there?
Yeah, I think for the organizations that are adopting it, I mean, certainly we use it internally. We get, incredible productivity improvements by using it, responsibly and safely. And I think there are many organizations that are using it today, whether or not they know it, right? So it's going to find its way in. It finds its way in through a couple of different ways. You can come in through a new technology like ambient listening, right? Where we're going to apply this, it's new, it's got all AI, it's AI first, et cetera. But there are legacy systems where AI is coming in through updates, and you may not be aware of that. And so taking that life cycle approach to AI, where it is in your organization, how it's getting in, it could be through shadow IT, right? It could be a doctor or some other clinician or set of clinicians are using it on their phone, their personal phone, right? And so we think that we're just scratching the surface as it relates to adoption, but also potential risk in the near future. So, but what excites me about AI is if we put the right guardrails in place and we think about how we make it safe and reliable and responsible, then it becomes very powerful. Because if you haven't used AI yet, or if you have used it, you really understand the significant impact it can have in your day-to-day job. And I think that, more and more people should be, looking at how it can affect their day-to-day job, but also where it can take them longer term as it relates to that transformation, right? We talk about digital transformation all the time, right? Loosely. We throw out that there's an opportunity to actually digitally transform your organization in a way that can leverage not so much generative AI, that's important today, but where it's going is agentic. And agentic is, being able to do tasks from start to finish in a way that a human would do without human intervention, right? Now you have levels of autonomy that are being published today. So how much interaction, what autonomy level and how much interaction is a human having in that overall transaction. But longer term, once we get this right, you're going to have agents talking to agents, and you're going to have the ability to have this, what I call a governance agent, right? An agent that's sort of going out and watching the agents work and then governing the behavior and setting up those guardrails to make sure that the agents don't go rogue, right? And I think there's an opportunity in the interim for people to take that role on as well. And so longer term, as I think about the transition, you might have these AI governors that are people that are trained in AI. They understand things like hallucination, drift, et cetera. They know where AI can get us into trouble, and they're watching and they're governing and they're making sure that the AI that we're using in our organization is responsible and also safe.
So let me take it in a different direction. So I can't think of an industry that's more decentralized than healthcare. And that's both on the patient side and the service provider side, or the service side. And then you have things like the HITECH Act, which sought to digitize all patient information so that it could be shareable. That seems like a great stepping stone for AI. Is that the future, that we're just going to continue to be more distributed and more kind of collective in healthcare? And what are the cybersecurity risks associated with that? That was a hell of a question, but please go ahead.
Yeah, that's, it's funny too, because, as you know, we've been in this game a long time. You see these cycles repeat, right? So you go from centralized computing to decentralized computing to back to centralized computing. And now we've got decentralized or distributed computing, certainly with AI. And so, it's sort of it's question, and I guess it's that age old question about the universe: is it expanding or contracting, right? Yeah, I think yes. The answer is it's going to be more distributed over time. There'll be functions that'll become centralized as we learn. But I think computing does offer that level of freedom for it to work in a decentralized or distributed fashion. Look at blockchain, distributed, right? That's the future of our finance industry, and it's a distributed model. So I suspect that, in a perfect world, if you remember Star Trek, you had that little tube you go into, and it was sort of the medical, you go in, you get your diagnosis, you get your care. I suspect we're going to have those, I don't know when, but we'll have those maybe within our lifetime, and they'll be in your house. And so that's the ultimate in distribution, right? Where care now is at the point of where people, wake up. You walk into this thing, and it sort of does your diagnosis, and maybe it gives you a few shots. Maybe it gives you your vitamin B shot or some other, shot that you need. If you're diabetic, you get your, instead of taking 15, 20 pills, you get a nice, jab, and you're off for the day. So I don't know. I mean, I think more and more we're distributing the care, and we have an opportunity to go all in at some point with technology, and then it'll be an economics conversation, right? And then it'll be, some people will have them in their homes, some may have them in the community center. Who knows how this will all go down, John, someday.
Well, we're on our way there with wearables, and that's a big trend in healthcare too. Let me ask you about the CISO, because I have a theory that because of the influx and proliferation of new technologies in healthcare, I think that the CISO will ultimately, more healthcare CISOs will report to CEOs than currently. Now, that's a general trend across all industries. I think it's going to accelerate in healthcare. What do you think? Am I smoking dope, or do I have something here?
Yeah, I think we've been threatening that for a long time. It's certainly
True.
I don't think it's necessarily a new idea. No offense, but I do think that in some situations where the organization is more mature and the CISO is much more of a visionary and a leader, and that can bridge the gap between the business, truly the business, and technology and the risk associated with technology. Yeah, there's opportunities for that CISO to have much more agency at the executive level, and also be much more of a forward-leaning board participant, right? Not just showing up and throwing up speeds and feeds, but actually walking through risk and walking through the impact it has to the overall business. So taking a very different approach to risk management, which we would say is much more aligned with the business processes and also the critical functions within healthcare. So you can have much more of a business-oriented conversation, not a technically oriented conversation. And I think that's the thing that's happening for the more mature organizations. But there's a lot of CISOs, and I say this with all deference, that are pushing too much responsibility down to their teams. And I mean that again, respectfully, because there are some team members at all levels that are really good, right? And they're going to be CISOs in the next probably 3 to 5 years, right? But mostly, to move forward requires change, and what we see is most folks hate change, right? They hate it. they despise it, and quite frankly, some will actually be proactive about sabotaging it, and others will be, subconsciously sabotaging it, right? For other reasons. And it's not so much their issue per se, it's the fact that a leader has to drive change or has to delegate it to someone that can drive change. It can't just be expected that the organization is going to adopt something new. And what we find, certainly in our business, is that you can have the best technology, but if you don't have alignment with people in the process, you're going to have a failed outcome. And when you think about the change, right, you have to take those three things in concert. You have to look at the people, you have to look at the process, and you have to look at the technology. And here's where it goes wrong, right? If the organization is taking and acquiring, they've identified a problem, they acquire technology to solve the problem, but they don't change their process or don't let the product inform their process, disaster. And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of the process old, because it's old, right? It's legacy. That's why you have a problem. It could be one of the reasons why you have a problem. You have to look at the process, right? If you're not willing to look at your process and have the technology and the people inform changes to the process, you're not going to get maximum value out of the new technology. You're not going to get the outcomes that the solution provider is promising you. And so it's oftentimes not on the technology. It's on how we adopted the technology. Did we look at it and inform the process and the folks that are actually doing the work in a way that helps us understand what's the risk of failure? What are our odds of getting great outcomes out of this, right? So I think that we see that more and more. And I think that's going to be the single biggest constraint, if you will, to a CISO getting to the table.
Okay. Well, and you're teeing up our final section, which is the cybersecurity bridge, and you pointed to the need for process evolution or process reengineering. But let me talk about a showstopper that I see, and that's data. So I know that Stanford Medical has created some AI applications, and to train their model, they had to get data from, they said, 1,200 different systems. So that involves a lot of data. Well, first of all, do we have the standard data formats to do that, or are we in data kind of middleware data transformation hell in that? And then also, like, what about the data security around that?
Yeah. Data. Yeah, that's going to drive a lot of success or failure, right? Man, it's such a hard question to answer because it's multifaceted, right? You have to, on one hand, the models aren't going to exist with a level of efficacy without the right data. On the other hand, you have to be you got to be vigilant about the data that you're training, how you're training it, who's got access to it, et cetera. So I'll just give you an example of what we did, because our customers care about security, and our customers aren't going to just adopt AI without actually going through the AI governance process that we just talked about, right? And mostly, they need options. They need to adopt based on their ability to adopt, based on their time frame. So what we did is we took a proprietary approach working with AWS, and we built our secure container. Our data stays in our container, it doesn't leave, right? And then we have it as a substrate architecturally within the platform. And then our teams build features, capabilities based on what's available. And then we make them optional. So they're based on demand. A customer can adopt 1, can adopt 5, can adopt, 1, 7, and 10, or all of them. So we provide that ability to adopt at your pace when you're ready to do that, and also give them the ability to turn it off if it's not working for them. So we think that's the right approach. We think more and more AI, or certainly companies that have legacy applications or relatively new platforms that want them to be AI ready or AI first, do it responsibly. Do it in a way that gives your customers option to adopt based on their time frame and based on their needs.
Okay. Uh, Another thing that I see as a potential impediment is training. So all of these new AI technologies, all of this data that's being used in AI models, um, what about data handling? What about risk management around the data? What about training people about new types of threats, like deep fakes and things like that? I mean, a physician is paid and trained and spends a lot of time learning how to treat human medical conditions. Do we have the right infrastructure for training moving forward?
No, we don't. We got a lot of work to do on the training front. Yeah, and I don't feel like I answered all your full question about data, but I
It
think
was a
it it
lot.
yeah. I think there's going to be generic application of AI and language models, et cetera. And within that context, people will have to understand risks and make decisions accordingly. And then there's going to be domain specific LMs. I think that's where things have to go. And there's your opportunity to actually constrain access in a way that makes it much more secure for the end users and really allows you to throttle the risk accordingly. So I think that's where people need to move towards. And I think people are starting to think about domain specific LMs and things of that nature. So that's one thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is, as it relates to training, and deep fakes and other types of attacks, there's a thing happening, in tech in general, based on how people have moved out of the office, right? And you may or may not be aware of this, but I sit on some CEO forums. I talk to peers, and this is a relatively new phenomenon, but there are people that are in remote positions that are actually managing multiple jobs. And so the question is, how do you find that out, right? And in a way, there's obviously the ability to have hobbies and things, or maybe do stuff after hours and stuff. But I've heard reports of CEOs where they've found people working two jobs, getting paid, for two jobs, and that's a problem in and of itself. Imagine having deep fakes in the middle. And then I've heard and you probably have heard these examples too, where there's a group of people that are using deepfake technology as a business model. And what they're doing is they're applying for jobs and they're matching their resume with the application and the job. And then they're creating a deepfake, and they're using the deepfake in the interview process because it's over Zoom, right? And then they're taking the job, and they're taking the job for a year, but they're doing it with multiple people, and they're doing round robin. So it's like, how do you manage these multiple jobs? They're managing them because multiple people are part of the process. So they're doing enough to stay hired over that year, but not enough that would impede on their ability to handle more of those opportunities, right? So they're leveraging this system, and they're fraudulently taking dollars away from organizations that could be applied in other ways. So that's just one example, right?
That's crazy.
You can imagine with telehealth and the combination of these things. Now you could have, I'm meeting Dr. Olstick now, and he's going to help me with my the pain I have on my side, and I'm going to pay him a lot of money now. Or maybe he's got an alternative treatment for my rare disease, and he's going to help me, but it's BS, and I'm sending him Venmo money, and it's a complete ruse.
Well, now you just gave me a side hustle as Dr. Olczyk. So, Ed, we're almost at the end of our time, so I'm just going to ask you a couple of really rapid fire questions.
Sure, go.
The future of regulatory or regulations in healthcare, will it change? Is it changing now?
Changing now.
Okay.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, we as an industry had worked towards opening up HIPAA and making it more relevant today based on new technologies and new risks, et cetera. I participated with the HHS and the Health Sector Coordinating Council and CISA on building out the cybersecurity performance goals, which were going to be, sort of like think of a meaningful use standard for cybersecurity in healthcare, and now that's completely on hold.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's on hold. I was going to say, keep me abreast of that. So the future of sort of collective health care, and what I mean is, are the big teaching hospitals, the big pharmaceuticals and medical technology companies, are they going to hone this in and develop proprietary apps, or are we really going to share the data and develop collective type of healthcare that benefit all of society? I know that's another big question, but give it a quick shot.
Well, there's mechanisms already in place to do that with what they call institutional review boards, research studies that include, an academic medical center, a hospital with patient data, and then a pharmaceutical company that's bringing out new treatment or a new drug. So those structures, those processes already exist. And whether or not that'll be accelerated with AI, I'm sure that's coming, right? And then we put the guardrails on accordingly to make sure that, patient safety is first and foremost. We already do that from a human safety perspective, right? The IRB has controls and protocols for human safety, but we need data safety controls as well.
Yes. And I give the healthcare industry a lot of credit because there are some data standards for interoperability that are ahead of many other industries. So final question, I ask every guest this: if you had to give, I guess, medical CISOs one piece of advice moving forward, what would it be?
Probably figure out how to transform your organization to take you into the next decade. I mean, that CIOs right now are focused on digital transformation from the business perspective. How do we generate more revenue? How do we generate more margin, right? And I think the CISO has to have the same focus, but from the CISO's perspective. And I highly recommend people, start really driving those conversations, because there's an opportunity to transform cybersecurity as well in a positive way to prepare us for the next 10 years. And I don't see a lot. I see that happening in pockets. There are some of our customers doing it. I know of other CISOs that are doing it, but it would be great if that was a top priority for all CISOs.
Yeah, and I'll just add from my research, it's embrace speed, as you're saying, but wrap it in business-friendly governance. And business-friendly meaning support the business, enable the business, but manage or mitigate risk to the business. So, and
Risk is a business issue.
It is, as cybersecurity always is. And coincidentally, Ed, I have a doctor's appointment in a couple of hours, so I'm just prepped to talk to my doctor about technology now.
Is it Dr. Gaudet you're meeting, or?
No, it's not Dr. Rolczyk either. But Ed, thanks so much
Thank you, John.
being a guest. And for my audience, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon with another episode of the Cybersecurity Bridge.